Hi everyone. Today I would like to talk to you about utilities, command line utilities. But first of all, if you're new here, welcome. I typically make videos about command line Linux, cloud technologies, Kubernetes, and so on. If you're a subscriber, thank you and welcome back. So command line utilities are tools that we use every day, and they perform tasks that are very generic. However, it's good to know about what those tools are, where they came from, and maybe other tools that you didn't know about. So first of all, let's focus on coreutils. Coreutils is a Linux package available in almost all package repositories that contains essential command line utilities. They provide basic file operations and text manipulation capabilities, and they are really at the core of all GNU Linux operating systems, hence coreutils. So let's look briefly what they are. So here you have an info, or I am using a colorized info program that talks about various coreutils. So for example, here you see cat is one of those coreutils that you probably know about and use it every day. You can read all about it, and that's kind of help that's provided by the info file. And you can type info coreutils to learn about all the coreutils available in your system. Some of them you know, some of them might be a little bit more exotic, like fold, for example. I believe head and tail everybody uses. However, split maybe not that often. A really good read, just skim through it and you can familiarize yourself with the utilities that you don't know about or you would like to know about more. So this was a very brief introduction to coreutils. Other than coreutils package, we have so-called Swiss Army knife or a trifecta of Linux system utilities, and those are sed, awk, and grep. Those three tools is probably something that you constantly use. They are modern alternatives to those tools. So I just wanted to mention that they are not per se part of the coreutils package, but they also installed on every system and they are accessible. However, you might think that you already know command line well. You use coreutils every day, you integrated them with maybe your Vim or NeoVim. I recorded a video about using external commands from within Vim. I'll link it in the description below. But you might say, okay, there are certain cases that I would like some more functionality, but I don't want to install some maybe different programs from various repositories. I want to have it in a kind of well-tested package. And that's where Moreutils come in. So Moreutils is a collection of additional command line utilities that didn't fit in the original coreutils that came from the early days of Unix. And it fills the gaps in the capabilities of coreutils, mostly by providing convenience and some specialized cases. So let's briefly look at what utilities are available in the Moreutils package. We will go in detail through some of them, but just so you know, those are all the utilities available. So we have 15 various utilities. So why do we choose Moreutils rather than installing packages on our own? Mostly because they are cross-platform. They work on every Linux distribution. They work on Mac, they work on BSD, they work on other more exotic systems, and also will work on Windows with the WSL. As I mentioned, both Moreutils and coreutils are available in various package managers. So whether you're using apt or yum or pacman, whatever your system is, Moreutils will be there. And they're quite flexible. They like typical utilities, they would work in servers, in desktop environment, containers, and so on. So the origin of Moreutils, they were developed by a guy named Joe Hess, and first release was in 2007, and you can read about it. I provide links at the end of the presentation. It's quite interesting read. The guy was committing a lot to open source GNU Linux, and then kind of alongside with the community came up with a set of tools that fill those gaps in core utilities. We're gonna go through various commands, and I'll provide some examples for each command to show you the use cases and why those are great. But before we do, let's go quickly through commands basics. So obviously executing a single command, everybody knows we want to do cat or anything else, hit enter and the command executes and prints out to standard out. But we also have a pipe operator, which can send the standard out to standard in of another command. We have substitution, which is $ and open and close brackets. Then the command will be evaluated in place. And we have also various logical operators. We can concatenate commands or we can conditionally run them. So those are like a quick rundown before we start, that commands can be combined in various ways. And this makes it more interesting. All right, let's start by looking at our first Moreutils command, which is called combine. What it does, it combines the lines of two files using various Boolean operators. And it's almost like using cat with maybe sort, but it just gives you much more flexibility. So in this example, we are going to actually see how two files can be combined. So at the bottom here, you can see we have one file called syslog day1 and syslog day2. They are both almost identical. So they both contain the error and warning line, but the info line is different. Syslog day1 contains info with a different content, and syslog day2 contains info with a different content. So when we start and use end, the combine with end would output the content of two files that is present in both files. So we have a scenario now where we have error and warning. They're exactly the same lines in both files, and that's what end here outputs. Another scenario is using OR, and OR is really like concatenating two files. They will output all the lines combined. Another operator is negative OR or XOR, and this would output the lines that are different in two files. And we have those info lines that are different. And finally, we have NOT, which would output the line that is not present in the second file, but is in the first file. So in the first file, we have system rebooted, but this line is missing. So if you ever worked with Excel and VLOOKUP function, or performed some kind of data crunching, combine is this really nice and easy way to line compare files and perform various logical operations. So very useful tool. I use it quite often where I have similar files that changed over time. All right, let's go back to the presentation. The next tool is if not empty, and the tool is called ifne. This tool executes commands only if the previous command doesn't produces output, if it's not empty. So here we have an example of a short log file, and the command we will look at, we are grepping for post. So we are going to find two lines with post. And if the output of this is not empty, we are going to output it to the terminal and also to a file that's called post access. So let's see it in action. So here we have our post access file. You can see it's empty. And here I prepared the command. If you run it, you can see that we have output to the terminal. That's how the T works. And we notice that the grep output is not empty. So something was printed out to standard out, and we were able to capture it. So very nice for scripting, very nice for like a very simple logic. If something does not produce output, or you can also negate it with the tag n option, then react to it and execute any command. All right, next one is parallel. Parallel is super interesting because when coreutils came out as a library, this was in the early days of Unix, invented in Bell Labs and then kind of growing and becoming more and more ingrained within the GNU Linux ecosystem. But there was no multi-core processors at that time. So all the commands were just working with a single core. So there was no notion of multi-core. And Parallel adds ability to run any command on multiple core systems. So we can execute this command now, and you can see my computer has 4 cores. It's a relatively old computer, and Parallel can take advantage of all the cores. So with the example we will look at, we will use curl to kind of load test or provide parallel run requests in parallel to an example.com. By the way, this is a real page. You can use it for testing. So ICNA created this page and you can just play with it. So let's see how it looks in action. So here I have created 2 files. I have 2 scripts, run sequential and run parallel. So run sequential file, it simply logs the output and it runs this curl command we've seen earlier in a sequence. I'm using a coreutils called seq sequence that produces a sequence of numbers from 1 to 50. So we 50 times execute sequentially this command. And another file called parallel that does the same command, but I'm using now parallel. And here I am adding a flag ETA, which shows the progress bar, and I'm creating jobs batches of 10. So the parallel command will fire 10 curl requests in parallel. So it should be significantly faster than the other command. And I'm measuring everything using time, which is an internal command. So let's close this. I'm going to now switch on in Tmax the combined execution of panes. So this little symbol means that if I hit enter, this enter command will be sent to both of my panes. If you want to learn more about Tmax, I've created another video. I'll leave the link also, and you should see it somewhere on the top. But let's execute those. So you can see on the right hand side we have parallel and it's done. So we have 2.4 seconds from the user field, 2.7 seconds of the whole command being executed, and the sequential command is still executing. So this is definitely an interesting use case where you can parallelize operations just by adding parallel. It's a powerful command. It has a lot of options. And if you have a multi-core environment and you find something slow, maybe you do FFmpeg operations or anything like that, parallel can really help. As you can see here, almost 20 seconds here and 2.7 seconds here. So significant improvement. All right, another command is P, which stands for parallel T. It's a little bit unfortunate name, but it does what it says. And what it does, it allows you to send standard input to multiple commands simultaneously. You can think of it as, let's say you cut a file or you create a command and it produces something to standard out, and you want to send it to one command, then to the other, and so on and so forth. Then you have to kind of pipe this, and it's going to be a sequential operation. So very similarly, like we've seen earlier with parallel, this is what T does, which kind of outputs something to the terminal and writes something to a file. But in this case, it can parallelize the output. So each of the commands is going to receive an independent copy of standard out. In this case, we are cutting out the web access log, and then parallelly, all the commands would receive it and all of them would run. So again, this parallelization notion and the fact that you don't have to sequentially pass the commands. So let's see it in action. So here's this command, and as you would expect, we have grepped for all the various strings here, and this happened in parallel. So we have output that is combined together in this case. Very powerful, also really useful if you want to parallelize output to various commands. You don't need to use jobs for that. You can just use the p command. Soak is also quite interesting. You probably encounter situations where you want to change something in a file, but in place. So in this case, we are sorting numbers in ascending order, and we want to change it in place. So if you would like to do this like that, you would have to first sort it, then maybe output it to a temporary file, and then replace the content of the numbers.txt with the content of the temporary file. But Sponge does it for you. You don't need to do all of this one by one. You can just do it in single operation. So let's see how Sponge looks like. I'm not sure why it doesn't work. So we do Sponge. Before we run this operation here, let me cut numbers. So you can see that we cut names, not numbers. So numbers is just unsorted list of numbers. Now when I run this sort and Sponge, and again we cut numbers, you can see that now they are sorted in place. So the file has been sorted and then changed in place by using Sponge. There's various other use cases for it, but it's really a convenience utility that you can use, and it's quite cool. Another one is TS. It simply prepends a timestamp to each line of input. So let's say you have a log file, like in our case, and this log file doesn't have input, so we can do cut log. You can see here it has some dates here and time, but it's just an artificial example. We can prepend an actual date and time to it by using TS. So let's execute it in place here, and as you can see, it added today's date and time. So a very nifty utility that you can kind of add timestamp to your log files or other files. Another interesting command is vidir. This command lets you edit a directory as if it were a Vim buffer. By the way, if you've watched any of my new Vim videos, you know that I mentioned a plugin that does exactly this. In my case, I'm using mini files, but there's also Oil and Vim, a popular plugin that allows you to edit a directory and files and directories inside of a buffer. But vidir is a precursor of those type of plugins, and it's included in Moreutils. So let's see it in action. So here I have a directory. You can see here we are in the core Moreutils folder, and then I can I don't want this 11 in front of my backup. So I can just simply replace this 11 with nothing. And then when I save the file, then you see that there's a backup instead of 11. So I edited the content of a folder using this vidir. The bonus here is that you don't need to have NeoVim installed to use the plugins, but it's a little bit less feature rich, and it's quite more straightforward. It doesn't have the security guardrails that mini files or Oil and Vim provide. But again, a very interesting tool. One more tool I want to show you is vipe or vipe, and what it allows you to do, it allows you to edit the content of a pipeline. So here we have a pipe operator which essentially pipes an output of this grep command, and before we can use a T command on it, we can modify the content of it. Let's see it in action so it's a little bit easier to understand. So here I have this command, and when I hit enter, you can see what's happening. It grepped for the post here, but instead of showing it to the output, first it shows me the content in the editor. So I can do this, for example. I can change all the posts to get, for instance. And now when I save the file, you can see that the output that the T outputted for us actually contains get, which is my edit. So it's very nice to do this if you want to have output of a command, and maybe you want to add some prefix or suffix somewhere, or you want to check it before in NeoVim, with more powerful search and replace capabilities. So definitely something I also use quite often. All right, so we are done with overview of the Moreutils. Those are not all the commands. We've seen the list here is bigger, but I've selected the ones that I find really useful, and I think you can benefit from using them instantly. For additional resources, GNU coreutils documentation is a great start on the coreutils library. I can recommend a book, a Linux command line and shell scripting Bible. It's a quite big book and still has some timeless info there if you prefer actual book over other online resources. There is a GitHub repository, The Art of Command Line, definitely worth starting it and then reading the content there. And finally, a blog from Joey with Moreutils. Also give it a read. So that was it. That's Moreutils. I wanted to show you how Moreutils can be utilized, what benefits they bring, and how can they make you a more efficient and better developer or system administrator or whatever you're doing with command line. I believe that getting to know command line well is really what is important in terms of boosting productivity. So all those tools are available. Explore them. Let me know in the comments. Are those something you were aware of? Is this new for you? Do you see yourself using any of those tools that I mentioned? Yeah, other than that, thanks for watching and see you in next video.